The ring wasn't hers. The name wasn't hers either. Not yet. Not really. Not in any way that felt like more than paperwork. Willa Beckett had been married for 11 days when she first understood that her husband did not know her name. Not her full name. He called her Miss Beckett when he remembered to call her anything at all, and once, on the third morning, he said, "Willa," so briefly and without inflection that it might have been a cough. She had not expected love. That was the arrangement. And she had agreed to it with both eyes open, sitting across a parlor table from her father and a man named Garrison Holt, while the fire burned low and no one offered to stoke it. She was 24. Garrison Holt was 41, and recently widowed, and in possession of a tobacco estate outside Lexington, Kentucky, that her father needed access to for reasons she was not asked to understand. The terms were discussed as though she were a parcel of land herself, and she had sat with her hands folded and her chin level, and said nothing until they asked her to sign. She signed. What she had expected was civility. She had expected the cold but functional arrangement that she had read about in enough books. Two people who maintained the household, and did not quarrel in public, and perhaps in time, found in each other something warmer than indifference. She had not expected this. A husband who moved through the house like a man who had left something in another room and could not remember what, who took his meals at odd hours, who had a study on the second floor that she had never been invited into. She had been given a bedroom with yellow curtains and a writing desk and a view of the back lawn. It was a generous room. She told herself that every morning. Her name before the marriage had been Willa Beckett. Her father was Preston Beckett, who bred horses and owed money and smiled the way men do when they are accustomed to being forgiven. Her mother had died when Willa was 9, and the particular shape of that absence had made Willa practical in ways her sister Adeline had never needed to be. Adeline was 3 years older and considered the beauty of the family, which was true, and also considered the sensible one, which was not. Adeline had a way of appearing sensible, measured voice, careful posture, the right word at the right moment. That had convinced their father and most of Lexington society that she was the steady one. Willa had long since stopped correcting the impression. It was Adeline who had caused the trouble with Garrison Holt. The details Willa had pieced together slowly, the way you piece together something broken. Not all at once, but one shard at a time, cutting yourself in the process. What she understood was this. Before the arrangement with their father had been formalized, before the parlor table and the fire and the papers, Adeline had spent 6 weeks corresponding with Garrison Holt in letters that implied considerably more than friendly interest. She had visited the estate twice under the pretense of accompanying a mutual acquaintance. She had led Garrison Holt to believe, without ever saying so plainly enough to be held accountable, that a proposal would be well received. The proposal had not materialized. Garrison Holt had discovered something. Willa did not know what, precisely, and Adeline would not say, and withdrawn from Adeline with the cold efficiency of a man who had been deceived and knew it. But their father's financial needs had not changed, and Garrison Holt, it turned out, still needed a Beckett daughter. Not for sentiment, for the connection, for the social arrangement. Willa had been the one available. She had not told anyone what she knew about Adeline's role in all of it. There was no point. The contract was signed. The house was real. The yellow curtains were real. Adeline had sent a note after the wedding that said, "I hope you will be very happy." And Willa had read it 3 times trying to find the sincerity in it, and then folded it into the back of her desk drawer. On the 11th night, Garrison Holt knocked on her door. She was reading, or trying to. She had read the same paragraph 4 times, and she said, "Come in," and he did. He stood just inside the doorway in his shirt sleeves, which was the most informal she had seen him, and he looked at her with the expression of a man reviewing a ledger he doesn't fully understand. "I want to be straightforward with you," he said. "All right," she said. "This arrangement was not what I anticipated when I first spoke with your father." He paused. He had a way of pausing that felt deliberate, like he was selecting each word from a drawer. "I want you to know that I don't blame you for anything." She waited. "I'm saying," he said, and then stopped again. "I'm saying I'd like us to find a way to be something other than strangers, if you're willing." Willa set her book down. She looked at him. Really looked, which she had been careful not to do because looking felt like wanting, and wanting in this house felt dangerous. Garrison Holt was not a handsome man in any dramatic sense. He was solid and weathered and had lines around his eyes that suggested he had spent considerable time outdoors and considerable time troubled. His first wife had been dead for 2 years. He had a son, Eli, who was 8 and who Willa had met exactly twice, both times in the hallway, both times an encounter of mutual uncertainty. "I'm willing," she said. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I'm willing. He nodded once, as though something had been resolved, and left. She sat in the yellow-curtained room for a long time after that, not reading. The estate ran itself by routine, which was the only honest thing she could say about it in those early weeks. There was a housekeeper named Mrs. Prentice who had been managing the household since before Garrison's first wife died, and who regarded Willa with the polite wariness of a woman who has seen arrangements come and go. Mrs. Prentice was not unfriendly. She was careful, which was not the same thing, but Willa respected it. There were staff she was gradually introduced to. There was the cook, whose name was Bram, who was 60 years old, and had opinions about how the kitchen should be run that Willa had no interest in overturning. There was a groundskeeper named Fletcher, who wore the same canvas coat every day, regardless of weather, and never seemed to notice her. There was Eli, who ate breakfast at 7 and left for his tutors by 8, and returned in the afternoons trailing mud in patterns that suggested adventure rather than education. Willa had not known what to do about Eli. She had no experience with children, or almost none. She knew how to manage a household, her father's, since she was 16. And she knew how to move through a room without taking up too much of it, and she knew how to smile at people who deserved something better than a smile, but wouldn't accept anything else. She did not know how to talk to an 8-year-old who looked at her like a theorem he hadn't been given the tools to solve. On her 15th day, she found him in the back garden trying to repair a birdhouse with a hammer too large for his hands. She stood at the edge of the garden and watched him for a while. He was struggling, and he knew it, and he would not ask for help. She recognized the posture. The nails at the wrong angle, she said. He looked up. Not surprised exactly, but recalibrating. If you tilt it about 5 degrees toward you, the wood won't split. He looked at the nail. He looked at her. He made the adjustment. The hammer fell true. He didn't say thank you. He bent back over the birdhouse with renewed focus. But he didn't tell her to leave either. She sat on the garden bench and picked up a book she'd brought, and they stayed like that for an hour. Him building, her reading, without speaking again. It was the most comfortable she had been since arriving. Adeline came in the 3rd week. She arrived in a hired carriage with a hat box and a smile that meant she wanted something, and she embraced Willa on the front steps with the warmth of a woman performing warmth for an audience, and she said, "Oh, you look so well, how wonderful," in a voice that managed to sound both sincere and like a question. Garrison was not at the house. He was in Lexington on business he had mentioned to Willa in passing. Something involving contracts, something that would take 2 days. He had told her before he left, which she was beginning to understand was a form of consideration he was working toward. "He's away," Willa said. "I'll have Mrs. Prentice prepare the guest room. I can stay just the night," Adeline said. "I only wanted to see how you were getting on." She had not only wanted to see how Willa was getting on. Over dinner, Adeline ate with an enthusiasm that belied her small portions. Another performance. She asked about the estate, about Mrs. Prentice, about Eli, and finally, with the precision of someone who has been aiming at a target for some time, about Garrison. "Does he speak of me?" Adeline asked. Willa looked at her sister across the table. Adeline was still beautiful. That had not changed and would not change any time soon. And she was still wearing the expression she wore when she needed something, which was the expression of someone who expects to receive it. "No," Willa said. "Not at all, not to me." Adeline smoothed her napkin. "I think he misunderstood my intentions," she said. "I think if someone were to explain, Adeline, I was fond of him, Willa. I was genuinely fond." "I believe you," Willa said, because she did in a limited way. Adeline's affections were real. It was her methods that got away from her. "But I'm not going to speak to him about it. You're his wife. I am, which is precisely why I won't." Adeline set her fork down. She looked, for a moment, like the girl she had been before she understood that beauty was something you could leverage, before she had turned every room into a stage. She looked tired. "I made a mistake," she said. "I know. I didn't mean for you to. I know that too." Willa folded her napkin. "But you did. And here we are." There was a long silence. Outside, one of the horses in the far stable made a sound that carried through the evening air. "Are you happy?" Adeline asked. It was, Willa thought, an extraordinary question to ask under the circumstances. She considered it genuinely. "I don't know yet," she said. "I think I might find out." Adeline left the following morning before breakfast. Garrison returned on the second evening to find Eli asleep in the parlor, and Willa at the writing desk working through a set of household accounts she had asked Mrs. Prentice to explain to her 3 days earlier. He stood in the doorway. She was becoming familiar with the way he stood in doorways, as though the threshold required a decision, and looked at the papers spread across her desk. Those are the supply accounts, he said. I know. Mrs. Prentice showed me. She set down her pen. There's an error going back 6 months with the grain supplier. Either someone is miscounting or someone is rounding up. Either way, you're short about $40 over the period. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You found that in an afternoon." "I've been doing household accounts since I was 16, she said. "My father wasn't careful with money. I was careful for him." He came further into the room then. He sat in the chair across from the desk, not the chair she had thought of as his. He had other preferred chairs in other rooms. She had catalogued them. But this one, the one that meant he had chosen to be near her rather than settled elsewhere. "My first wife hated the accounts," he said. "She said they made the house feel like a business." "It is a business," Willa said. "It's also a home. Those things aren't exclusive." Something shifted in his face. Not a smile, exactly, but the adjacency to one, the direction a smile would go if it had more room. "My sister was here," Willa said. "While you were away." She watched him. He went careful, the way people do when they are maintaining stillness on purpose. "Ottiline came to see if she still had standing with you," Willa said. "I told her she didn't. I want you to know that I told her she didn't, and that I'm not going to be a root between the two of you." He looked at her for a long time. Outside, the evening was settling into proper dark, and the lamp on the desk was the only strong light in the room. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because you said you wanted us to be something other than strangers," she said. "I think strangers don't tell each other things like this. I think people who are trying not to be strangers do." He was quiet again. He had a great capacity for quiet. She was learning. That was different from the cold silence of the first days. This was a thinking quiet, a processing one. "She misrepresented herself," he said finally. "Your sister. She wasn't dishonest outright, but she let me believe something that wasn't true. When I understood what she'd been doing, He stopped. "I felt foolish." "You weren't foolish," Willa said. "You were deceived. Those are different. People usually blame themselves for being deceived. That's a useful habit for the people doing the deceiving. I don't think it's accurate." He looked at her, and there was something in the look that was new. Not warmth, not yet, but openness. The particular look of someone reconsidering a door they had bolted. "I'd like to read the account error you found," he said. "Will you show me?" She turned the papers toward him. November came in fast and cold, and the estate shifted into a different rhythm. Indoor work, inventory, the smell of wood smoke that clung to every room by mid-morning. Eli had decided that Willa could stay, which she understood, because he had not yet told her to go away. And for a child who expressed most things through deliberate absence, presence was its own verdict. He had taken to appearing in the sitting room in the evenings when she read. He didn't always read himself. Sometimes he drew, or worked on some wooden project with a small penknife he'd been given by the groundskeeper Fletcher, or simply sat. But he was there. She was there. They had established a kind of parallel existence that required nothing of either of them and somehow gave her more than most things in the house did. "Once," he said, without looking up from his drawing, "my mother used to read to me. Would you like me to read to you?" He thought about it. "Maybe," he said. She started that evening with something uncomplicated. A natural history book about American birds because she had seen him watching the birdhouse he'd repaired with a proprietary attention. And by the third page he had migrated from his chair to the arm of the sofa where she sat, not quite beside her, but close, in the way of someone who wants to look at the pictures. She did not make anything of it. That was important, she knew. Children who have lost something don't want their grief observed. They want to be allowed to walk back toward the world at their own pace, and be found there when they arrive. Garrison came home one evening to find them like that. Willa reading, Eli half asleep against her arm, the lamp warm between them. And he stood in the doorway in the way he did, and she looked up, and something moved across his face that she couldn't fully read but wanted to. He said, "I won't interrupt," and went upstairs, but he did not go immediately to his study. She heard his footsteps stop at the top of the stairs. She heard them stay still for a long moment. Then she heard them move away. It was a neighbor who told her, in the particular way that neighbors tell you things, with the guise of friendship and the aim of something less comfortable. Her name was Mrs. Braddock, and she came calling on a Tuesday with a pound cake and the kind of smile that meant the cake was cover. She was from the county set, well established, a woman who had known Garrison's first wife, and had opinions about the second arrangement that she had not, until now, been able to share directly. The pound cake was good. Willa gave it its due. "I hope you're finding your footing," Mrs. Braddock said. "It can be an adjustment, coming in after." "Well, after. It's been an adjustment," Willa agreed pleasantly. I knew Eleanor well, Mrs. Braddock said. Eleanor was Garrison's first wife. She was a remarkable woman, very much loved. I've heard that. Of course you have. She sipped her tea. And of course your sister knew Garrison before the arrangement. Before you. Willa set down her cup, with care. Yes. I only mention it because, well, the county talks, doesn't it? And some people have said things. About the arrangement, about whether it was entirely voluntary on your part. Willa looked at her. Mrs. Braddock had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, but not enough to stop. I want you to know, Mrs. Braddock said, that I've told anyone who repeats such things that it's no one's business, and that you seem a perfectly capable young woman. That's very generous, Willa said. Of course, and if there's anything you ever want to clarify about the circumstances. I'm a discreet person. She was not a discreet person. She was the county's most efficient information system, and she was sitting in Willa's parlor offering to carry whatever Willa gave her. I appreciate you coming, Willa said. The pound cake is excellent. Mrs. Prentice, would you show Mrs. Braddock out? After she left, Willa sat in the parlor for a few minutes with the empty teacups. Then she went upstairs and knocked on the door of Garrison's study. He opened it. He was in his shirt sleeves again, which was the informal version of him she had come to find most reliable. Mrs. Braddock paid a call, she said. I saw her carriage. She wanted to know if my marriage was voluntary. He was very still. I didn't tell her anything. But I think she'll say things regardless. About the arrangement, about Ottiline, about whatever she's pieced together. Willa looked at him evenly. I'm not distressed about it. I just thought you should know, so you're not surprised. What do you want me to do? He asked. Nothing, unless you want to. I can manage county opinion. She paused. I've been managing things since I was 16. He leaned against the doorframe. He looked at her with that reconsidering look she had catalogued, the open door one. You are not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? I don't know. Not this. She was not sure what this was, exactly. She suspected he wasn't sure either. That seemed for the first time, like something rather than nothing. I'll let you get back to your work, she said. Willa, she stopped. He almost never said her name. She had noted every instance. I want you to know, he said slowly, that the arrangement, the way it came about, I've been ashamed of my part in it, agreeing to the substitution. I want you to know I understand that's not a small thing. It's not, she said. I'm sorry for it. She considered that. The fire in the hallway, grate, was doing its quiet work, and the house around them was settling into evening. I don't need you to keep apologizing for it, she said. I need you to behave differently, and you are. That's sufficient for now. He looked at her. She had the sense again of a door. Sufficient for now, he repeated, and there it was, the adjacency to a smile, closer this time. She went back downstairs. She was smiling herself, which surprised her. Not a performed smile, not the kind she had carried through her father's house for years. The other kind. The one that happened without permission. December brought Eli's birthday, which he announced to Willa one morning, with the air of someone issuing a military dispatch. It's the 14th, he said. I'll be 9. That's a serious age, she said. He considered this. Yes, he said. I think so too. She had not known what to get him. She had asked Garrisons, who had said, a book probably. With the confidence of a man who has given books to a child who wanted other things. She had asked Fletcher, who had said, with his eyes still on the ground, he's been trying to whittle a hawk for 6 weeks and can't get the wing angle, and then walked away as though he hadn't said anything. She found a wood-carving manual in Lexington. She also found, through a contact of her father's she had no particular affection for, but knew was reliable, a small sample of quality basswood cut to manageable pieces. Eli opened the parcel on his birthday morning at breakfast, Garrison watching from across the table with the careful expression of a man who is trying not to influence an outcome. Eli looked at the book. He looked at the wood. He looked at Willa. Fletcher said you couldn't get the wing angle, she said. He went back to the book. He opened it to the table of contents with a focused deliberation that she had come to recognize as his version of excitement. He ran his finger down the chapter list until he found what he was looking for. Chapter 7, he said. Birds in motion. He looked up. How did you know? Fletcher told me, she said. By accident. Ellie nodded, accepting this as a reasonable explanation. Then, still looking at the book, he said, Thank you, Willa. It was the first time he had called her by her name. She looked at the plate in front of her and said, You're welcome, Eli, and did not make anything of it, because he didn't need her to. But across the table, she was aware of Garrison's eyes on her, and when she looked up he was not looking away. Happy birthday, Garrison said to his son. I'm going to start chapter 7 after breakfast, Eli said. After your lesson, Garrison said. After my lesson, Eli agreed, which meant he would bring the book to his lesson and read it between problems, but neither of them said so. It was Christmas Eve, when Garrison came to find her in the garden, which was a strange choice in December, but she had needed air and had been out there for 20 minutes, watching the frozen lawn hold its shape against a pale sky. He came around the corner of the house with his coat half buttoned, which meant he had come quickly, and he stood a few feet from her in the cold, with an expression she had not seen before. Something unguarded, something that required the outdoors to say. "I've been thinking," he said. She waited. "About the arrangement. About what it is." He stopped. "About what I think it might become if we." He stopped again. She had never heard him fumble before. She had catalogued many versions of him. The careful version, the thoughtful version, the distant version, the version who stood in doorways, and the version who sat in the wrong chair because he wanted to be near her, but not this one. "Go ahead," she said. "I'd like this to be a real marriage," he said. "Not the arrangement. Not the substitution. Something we've both agreed to, clearly, without the circumstances forcing it." He looked at her directly. "I'm asking if you'd agree to that, knowing it's a different thing from what we started with." The sky above the lawn was the particular white-gray of winter afternoons that she had always found either desolate or peaceful, depending on her state of mind. Right now it was peaceful. "I have conditions," she said. Something moved in his expression. She thought he might have expected this, and had wanted it, the way you want someone to be what you thought they were. "Tell me," he said. "I handle the household accounts permanently, not as a favor. As a role, I have access to Eli's education. Not control, that's yours. But input. He deserves more than books when what he needs is woodworking." Something shifted in Garrison's face that was not quite a smile, and not quite emotion, but was somewhere between the two. "Done," he said. "And I want you to tell me things," she said. "About the business, about the estate, about whatever is troubling you. I'm not asking to solve it. I'm asking not to be managed at a distance." He was quiet for a long moment. "My first marriage," he said carefully, "was not unhappy. But it was private in ways that I think now were not entirely fair to Eleanor. I kept things from her because I thought I was protecting her. I understand now that I was only making myself less visible." He looked at Willa. "I don't want to do that again." "Then we understand each other," she said. "Is that a yes?" The frozen lawn held its shape. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a hawk was circling something with a patience that would outlast whatever it was waiting for. "It's a yes," she said. "A clear one, with no circumstances forcing it." He breathed out, which she hadn't realized she'd been waiting for. He came closer, not dramatically, not quickly, but with the deliberateness of a man making a decision he intends to keep, and offered her his arm. Not a romantic gesture, exactly. A walking together gesture. A "this is how we go forward" gesture. She took it. They walked back to the house in the cold December air, her hand through his arm, the gravel crunching under their feet. The lights in the windows were already lit. Mrs. Prentice had a genius for lamplight, and the smoke from the chimneys was going straight up into the still air. Somewhere upstairs, Eli was probably reading Chapter 7. Maybe practicing the wing angle in the margins of his lesson notebook. The house looked from the outside like a house that was inhabited by people, rather than a house that was managed by them. That distinction, Willa thought, mattered considerably. The ring was hers now, so was the name in every way that made it real.